Hi, I'm Dave, welcome to the channel. In this video, I'm going to take this Revoslot Lister Storm and try and make it a little bit quicker. So you will probably recall I got this car, I did a very basic bit of oiling and tuning to it, not very much at all. Ran it round my track and I got a 5.4 second lap, which put me 2/10 off my lap record. And I did theorise that because this car is very wide and very low, that it would probably suit my track and should be good for a lap record. So I'm going to do a load of things to this car in this video to try and find that couple of tenths that I need to get me a new lap record. It may work, it may not. We may get close. We may get a new lap record. I don't know at the moment. Now, caveat, I'm going to do some pretty silly things to this car, like really geeky, over-the-top bits of tuning that if you're running this at home, you really don't need to do. A lot of this is not necessary. But I've got a 12-step plan for this. So I'm going to take this car completely apart first, and then we'll go through these 12 tuning steps. Okay, so I've broken everything down into its base components. We'll get to these two pieces of chassis in a minute. What I am going to do, and be very careful not to lose these little brass spacers that come here, because you need those, but I am just going to separate the axles and the spacers from the bearings. And so there we are. A pair of axles and 4 bearings. Now, the interesting thing about these bearings, and you should probably do this to all your Revoslots if you want them to run a bit smoother and a bit happier. As you can see already, just by me squishing these around on the paper, there's some really thick heavy grease that's in these bearings from when they were manufactured, and they're not the smoothest running, to be honest. And on top of that, there's some residue on these as well, because they don't slide through the bearings maybe as well as they should. So here we go. Step 1 is flush the bearings out. For this you will need a jar, probably glass, with a top that seals somehow. .9% isopropanol. Weaker will do, but you probably have to leave things in a bit longer. I'm going to hold my breath, but usually you should put a mask on before you open this stuff. It's really not very nice. So a bit of that in there. I'm going to pop the axles and the bearings in there. Close it up, get rid of all the fumes. Now this will flush, because it's quite a strong solvent, all of the grease out of these bearings. But it's going to take a while, so we need to let it sit, give it a swish around every now and then, and come back to it. You'll see when. So, step 2. Now, on this chassis, we need to check that it's flat. It should be, but we should just check. That piece is. And that piece is. If it's not, you can give it a little bit of a tweak. You should be able to flatten these out. Now the next thing I'm going to do, which is probably in the excessive category, is step 2, which is deburr all of the holes that are in the chassis. Because there's screws and things that go through these. It's been drilled, it's been anodized. It would just be nice to make sure there are no burrs in these holes. And the easiest way to do that is to get a fairly large metal drill bit. This one is 6mm, as long as it's considerably bigger than the holes. That should do you. And then just run round and take the edges. You'll feel it cutting into the aluminium. And just go round and do all the holes. So on to step 3. Having, as you can probably see, there's little silver circles around everything where I've deburred them. So having got all of these deburred, the next thing to do is something that people do in a number of fiddly ways. But essentially, because you've got 2 pieces of metal, one on up the other here, and they move up and down, you're going to get a certain amount of noise. So what people do is they put little bits of tape over everything and then try and put the bolts back. I found an easier way of doing this because I've got a vinyl cutter. Now you can't see it on here unless I get it in the light right, and you probably even then won't, but on here there are a series of concentric circles that make, if I can get one off, little white sticky washers. So this is shiny vinyl. What I'm going to do is fit these on both sides of all 4 of these holes so that no metal rubs against any other metal to make any clicky clacky noises. Now the easiest way to get these lined up with these holes, I think, is to pop this over the top of the hex bolt and then put the hex bolt through the hole. There we are. So 8 more or 7 more of those, and then we can put all of this back together with the hex bolts in, and it should be a bit quieter, and the surfaces should slip across each other a bit easier because this is quite shiny vinyl. So that's the plan, and that is step 3. After that, we might come back to step 1 because these have been swimming in the alcohol for about 24 hours now. So vinyl washers, reassemble the 2 parts of chassis, and then back to step 1 and then on to step 4. That's the plan. So I have to say that was a lot easier than people I've seen fiddling around trying to fit little pieces of electrical tape to these little joints. Went in very easily, still giving me a good bit of movement, but without the click-clack noise. So that really should quieten this car down quite a lot. And quieter is smoother. Smoother is faster. Now these 4 brass rattle bolts, rattle nuts, I've seen people graunch these up tight. You don't need to graunch them up tight. Just do them up, put the spanner on, tighten them up a little bit. Not too much. I mean, not much more than finger tight. They're not much more than finger tight when they come from the factory, to be honest. And then you just need to put a little bit of thread lock. And if you haven't got thread lock, a little bit of super glue, a little bit of nail varnish, just something on the top of that bolt back end that goes through the middle of the nut there. Just put a little bit on there just to stick the two together so that they don't undo. Now I'm going to use some thread lock because I've got some, but you don't have to. Could use anything, but really just a tiny little bit. There we are. So that should do for that. Need to let that go off and dry a little bit. So we will go back to step 1, as I mentioned before. Now this is 24 hours after I put these in the first place, and you probably can't see in there, but there is a whole load of kind of grainy bits of stuff, which is the thick, hard machining oil that was in the bearings when they were made. And yes, you can apply oil to them, but it doesn't really flush that old heavy crap out. You need to sort of dissolve it out like this. So having done that, I need to get these out of here. Pop them on a tissue and let the remaining alcohol fall out of them. And, you know, I didn't need to do those, but at least I know they're clean now. So yeah, I don't know if you can see it in there, but I don't know if it will focus. But there's a whole load of sludge in the bottom of here that's come out of these bearings. So then with these, I'm just going to let them soak through. I might give them a bit of a blot on the top as well. And then once I've let all the alcohol that's in there evaporate out, that's remaining, because there will be a little bit, then I'll flood them back up with, I mean, I just use sewing machine oil. It does the job. It's super light, it's super runny, and you do really want to over oil them just to make sure you've forced out any residue that was left, you know, of the alcohol drying or whatever. Anything that's in there should be loose. Flood the oil in the top, let it drain out the bottom. It should clear anything else that's left in there out. So we'll leave that like that for a bit. Again, we'll push that out of the way over there. And we will turn our attention to these axles for step 4. Now these axles slip through the bearings okay, but they've been machined, but at no point have they ever been, you know, polished up or anything. So I'm just going to get the Dremel out and the polishing wheel and just give these a damn good clean, quite frankly, because they were a bit sticky in the bearings before. And, you know, got a polishing wheel, should use it. Okay, while step 4 was probably a bit overkill for normal home use, step 5 you should probably do anyway to a new Revoslot. So what I'm going to do first is just loosely assemble both axles back onto here, and then we will align everything before we tighten it up. Okay, so that was a lot of fiddling around that you didn't need to see me do. I've put those two screws, those two screws, those two screws and those two screws in loosely. They're about half a turn backed off from where they could be. I've taken the tyres off, we'll get to those in a minute. And I've put the wheels on, but not too tight, so everything is still loose in here. You can probably see these posts are still moving, everything's loose, and the same at the back, because you just want to let this find its own happy place where everything's spinning and lined up, and then very gradually go around every single screw and tighten it up a little bit. Don't go too mad, because the moment you put too much torque on one of them, you'll pull this out of alignment, this tower, which means the bearing will go out of alignment, and that lovely straight axle you'd sorted out will have moved again. So just keep checking it, then go around and just nip it up a little bit more each time. In truth, you should probably do this in a diamond or a cross pattern like you would car wheel nuts, but no, there we are, I'll do it that way. So that is nicely nipped up, that won't be going anywhere, and that's still spinning quite freely, still a bit of play in there, because I need to adjust that up in a minute. I'll do the same at the back. Now if you've got a new Revoslot straight out of the box, the chances are, in the factory, they put these posts in and tightened them up and then push the axle through. So the chances are the axles are probably binding a little bit. So from new, you want to just back these off, give everything a little bit of a wiggle, and then tighten them back up, front and back, and then, you know, they should be better aligned. There we are. Now see, that has bound up. That is not as good as it was, so we need to let these off again. That's better. So the next thing I need to do is just adjust these wheels in enough that there's a tiny amount of float. You don't want the wheels squashed hard because they'll squash into the bearings. But then again, you don't want them so far apart that the bearings are rattling in their housings. So that's just a case of fine adjustment, which I'm going to do next. It's going to be a lot more faffing around. So again, I'll be back in a minute. So here we are back after quite a lot of fiddling and adjusting and fiddling and adjusting. I have got all the wheels on, and if we just check here, even without the momentum given by the tyres to keep these spinning, they're pretty good. So I'm going to pop the motor back in and set the gear mesh. There are lots of ways of doing this. Some people like to put a piece of paper in between so the gear mesh is correct. Various things. I just like to do it by feel, really. You should be able to feel some movement between the two gears, but not see it. And if that's the case, you've got it right. So I'm going to pop this in here. I am, of course, going to just check that both of these bolts are tight as well, because sometimes they're not. They are in this case. So I shall pop this back in. We'll deal with this guide in a minute. So I shall pop that back in there, set my gear mesh, do all of those things, and then we can come back and talk about the guide and things. And here we are done with the gear mesh set. And I have to say, sometimes these gears can be a little bit egg-shaped, or they just don't run smooth, but all the way around 360 degrees of that turn, that's really quite nice. Very smooth. Can't feel any interruptions or hindrances. So I think that's all pretty good, really. Now, if you're playing along with Spot the Deliberate Mistake from the last scene, you will see that I've now put the gear on the right way round. Stop! Sorry for the interruption here, but I looked at the video when I was editing it and I explained this terribly, so I've come back to explain it better from the future. So when I said I had the gear on the wrong way round, what I really meant was even Revoslot put the gear on the wrong way round. So from the factory, they come with the gear on the outside and the fixing on the inside. And this means that the gear mesh with the pinion is pretty much touching on the edge. It's not brilliant, but all you have to do is not do it wrong like Revoslot. Turn it around 180 degrees so that the gear's on the inside, and it will run pretty much down the middle of the pinion. Now, I haven't put the wheel back on for a minute. We'll get to that soon. The next step is to go through these tyres and just check, turn them all inside out. And I've done these ones. These are the fronts. They're a bit more tricky to do. Turn them all inside out and just make sure there's no bits of flashing or anything on the insides of them. Now, this particular tyre, this one has got flashing all around the edge of there that I need to take off. And if I turn it inside out, you'll see there's a casting lump there. That needs to come off again with a scalpel. So I'll do a bit of that. I'll do a bit of trimming on these, and then we'll be ready to put them back on the wheels. So really, this is step 7. So that's all the tyres cleaned up. And before we put them back on the wheels, now this is one thing that is probably a bit too much for just home racing. These are M4 by 3mm grub screws. And I got them off eBay from these people, GWR Fasteners. Now, every wheel has a grub screw in it, but there's a hole the other side as well. And the gear has a grub screw in it. But there's a hole the other side as well. Now, I reason if I put a grub screw in that side to match the one that's that side, while this wheel won't be perfectly balanced, or this gear, or any of these wheels, it'll be a lot better than it is now. Because it has got a weight added to one side and it hasn't to the other. So there must be an infinitesimally small, but however present, amount of vibration in there. So I'm going to double up all of the grub screws to try and make these wheels more balanced. More balanced is smoother, smoother is faster. We've been through this. Right. Grub screws then. And the last thing to do here is put the tyres on. Now, before you put any tyres on, give them a good old squish about. Put a bit of heat into them. Get them warmed up. Make them a bit more supple. No matter what car you're doing. Warm them up a bit. Doesn't need to be much. And then put them on. They'll go on easier. And they'll sit square. And they'll want to fit on the wheel a lot better than when they're cold and hard and you're trying to put them on. Okay, so step 8 is sorting out the guide. Now before we do anything, I'm just going to remove slotting the Revoslot braid. I don't like it. It's very thick. It's quite clunky and, you know, you bend it. It's not very soft. It's not great. I don't like it. However, we then need to pull these out of here. Well, they were super tight in there. Now, I'm going to replace the blade with standard slotting 035 braid. SP 103142. This braid is a little bit thinner and a little bit softer, and it just works better on my Carrera track. For me, anyway. So we need probably about that much. And then I've just realised what I actually need to do is poke these wires through there first and then do this. So I've got to take it all out again and then I'll put it back together. I'll come back when I've done this. Not all bits of video go brilliantly, do they? So here we are, after remembering to actually put the wires through the hole first and then put the guide on, and doing a lot of fiddling about and swearing and getting cross. It's in place. These are always fiddly, but it's worth it in the end. So the guide now has to go in. There is a spring on the guide. It's supposed to be sprung loaded. So we'll put this in here and then I'll stick it on the setup plate. And in theory, there should be enough, well, just about enough spring back on that guide to get the wheels where they want to be. Not quite. So, I've got a selection of outside diameter, inside diameter, outside diameter 6, inside diameter 4 spacers of different sizes, 0.1 millimeter, 0.2, 0.5 and 1. So what I'm going to do is just try and add a bit of tension to that spring by popping a couple of spacers on top and seeing if I can just cause that guide to push down a little more and lift those front wheels a little more. So there we are. A 1 millimeter spacer is definitely too much. So we'll take that off. Let's try a half. Spacer on, spring on, put it back together, sit it down. See, now that's about it. Those wheels are just about off the ground. With the added weight of this shell on there, I reckon that's going to be just about lovely. So, put the screw back in the top of the guide. And that is step 8. So step 9 is easy. Step 9 is oil everything. Now I know we've put oil on things before, but just go with it. Put more oil in. Worst comes to the worst, it'll spin out anyway if it doesn't need it. I mean, you don't want to drench it, but just another dab on all 4 of these. Little dab on the motor. Little dab on the motor that end, even though some people will swear at me for it. You're shouting at the screen now, I can hear you, but I've done it. And a little bit for the guide, just in that guide post. So that's step 8. Step 9, really, to be honest with you, they put this little bit of plastic on here. It's like a bit of heat shrink or something. And it's supposed to keep the cables tidy, but to be honest with you, it's just a bit rubbish. The best thing you can do to stick some cables down is find a tiny little bit of blue tack. You knew I was going to say that, didn't you? And we'll pop it in there, run our wires over the top. Stick them down. Kind of like that, so there's a bit of a loop. And I might get a bit more blue tack just to hold that. Make sure it's not touching the axle, but give it enough room so that these wires can do what they need to do, which is center the guide. So we're getting there. There's 2 steps left. The first of which is we need to run in the gears and the motor. Now, some people run in the motor separately and all of that, and then run the gears in and don't do it under load and do it at a few volts. Here's a reality. And I've done this before, especially with the Revoslot, because you can do it. Get a clothes peg, clip it under there, pop it on your track, put some car polish in here while it's running, have it running slowly, let the car polish go in, and slowly speed it up, and slowly the gears will get quieter and bed in more. You can use other things. Whitening toothpaste is quite good. Don't use the standard stuff, it needs to be the whitening because it's got the abrasive in it. You can use valve paste, but make sure you use the fine end of valve paste, not the rough end, or you'll ruin your gears. And you put in laps, effectively laps on the car, and you're going to bed the gears in, and you're going to free up some of these bearings from their manufacturer tolerances. Now, I know I've run this car around a bit already, so the motor's kind of broken in. But I'm going to go through the process anyway, just to get it nice and fine. I mean, I've reset all of this now. I should probably just bed it back in properly. So that will be step 11. So after a considerable amount of time, quite a lot of dabbing with a cocktail stick and putting some car polish on and then cleaning it up and re-oiling it again, what we have here is a nice quiet Revoslot. Now there is one more step 12 to do before we go for driving it around and seeing how well we've improved it and if we can get a lap record or not. And that's just use some sandpaper. You don't need to true these tyres, they're soft. They'll sort themselves out. But just get a bit of sandpaper and just put a radius just on the outside and the inside edge of both tyres. Just to stop the wheels digging in when it goes into a corner. If you've got a little bit of a radius on the edge, it'll afford it a little bit of roll. It's more likely to slide than it is to dig in and tip over. So that's always a good thing. So with the body back on now, one thing I will just mention, these 4 screws, people have various theories on how tight they should be. I tend to leave them just so that I can still just about get the body off if I want to. Sometimes, with a bit of playing about, you'll find that you can tighten these ones up and loosen the rear ones off a bit and it will help. It's minimal. I think we've done pretty much everything we can here, so we'll put this on the track. So here we are at the track. Now, what has all of this fiddling around and tuning done for me? Let me show you a very straightforward example. Here's a Revoslot. I've done some basic tuning on it, but it's pretty much how it came out of the box. So not terrible, but not entirely quiet either. And here's what we've done. So this car is so quiet, all I can hear is the tyres on the track, the joints in the track, and a little bit of a whispery noise, which I think is actually the braids on the rails. So this is already a massive victory. Whether or not this car runs faster and creates a new fastest lap for this track is almost neither here nor there anymore, because I'm not deafening myself when I drive it round the track. Anyway, I am now going to clean this track and run a few laps and see just how quickly I can get this to go. Okay, I should just qualify what I mean by clean the track. I got a cloth and I wiped the dust off it. And then I got a Carrera car, because they're nice and heavy, and sprayed some contact cleaner on these braids and ran it round just to clean off any residue that might have been on the rails. And that's it. I'm not going to do anything else to endanger, like taking any of the rubber build-up off the track. That needs to stay there. So 5.292 is the lap record. This car achieved a 5.49 from memory. So let's see if we can better that time, and indeed if we can get near that lap record. So there we are. I've done 50 laps and I've managed to get it down to 5.45 seconds, which is not the full 0.2 off, but I have knocked half a tenth off. So in just 50 laps, I'm already better. I'm still rusty. I haven't really driven many laps in anger on this track with a Revoslot in a long time. So I'm going to put in a bit more practice, but probably free the motor up just a little bit more, doing some more laps as well. I'm sure we'll get a quicker speed. I'm also pretty certain that it's going to happen just after the camera battery dies, and then I'll have to charge everything up and come back and show you what I achieved. I mean, it's just rotten luck, isn't it? It's bound to happen. And then I gave myself a talking to and stopped that insanity, because that's what it is, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. It wasn't going to happen. This car today did 5.457 seconds, and it was only 0.05 seconds faster than it was 2 weeks ago, despite doing lots of tuning. So you need to ask yourself, why? Well, I've got a theory. Today it's 30 degrees. We're having a heat wave. This plastic track, now we know it gets cold and it gets slippery. It loses its grip. There's a sweet spot in the middle, because when it gets warm, I did a bit of searching around to find this out. When it gets warm, it loses its grip as well. So there's a chunk in the middle where it's clearly not 30 degrees, but also probably not 5 degrees, whereby the track is at its best for grip and speed. And I reckon that would probably be around about April time, which is interesting, because when I looked up the lap record that I set with this car that I can't get within 0.2 of, I set it in April 2023. So I reckon track temperature is massive in this. On this particular day, this very fast car, I mean, it is a fast car, just got everything right, and I got a 5.2 second lap out of it. On a day like today, I don't think anything would go faster than a 5.4. So I thought I'd better check it. So having run this car today, I got this one back out and I ran this car today. So after all of that, this car managed a 5.476 second lap today. And this car managed a 5.457 second lap today. So this car's actually quicker on the day. So there were two things that could have happened here. we could have broken the lap record, the outright perfect conditions that aren't equal to today. We didn't, because the conditions are wrong. But this car is faster than the car that holds the lap record. I think we might need another conversation about this another time. But I hope you enjoyed the tuning tips, even though they were somewhat over the top. But this car is super smooth and quiet, you have to admit it. So it looks like I've got quite a lot of work tuning up all of these like I did this one. And then one day can run them all at once and find out which one's actually fastest. Good chat.